started writing Food for the Archons as a book of despair after watching my father die in 2013. During his transition, I experienced a series of paranormal and psychic events that left me feeling that I had either gone completely crazy or fell into humanity's darkest secret. I spent the next 5 years conducting extensive research, and I quickly learned that what I had experienced was real. My journey brought me to an understanding that showed me that despite the terrifying reality of an unseen predator, we as humans have a forgotten power. Just knowing this brings us tremendous hope in what once seemed a dark reality. I wrote this book for me in hopes of gaining a better understanding of our reality and relationship to it. But my hope is that you will find as much value in reading it as I did in writing it. I am Human, Food for the Archons, humanity's psychic connections, simulated realities, parallel worlds, and the manipulation of mankind. It's available on Amazon.com and at sixcentsmedia.net and wherever books are sold. I'm Dennis Nappy II, reminding you to let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
What impact does your intuition have on your mental health? And what impact does your mental health have on your intuition? I think the two are closely linked. And I want to talk about an experience that I'm currently going through, another moment of realization on this episode of the Secret Podcast. Dennis Nappy II here. Hi, Truth Seekers. It's been a while. I've been struggling for over a month to sit down and do this podcast and ruminating on it and thinking on it, and then just trying to find the motivation to do it. Things have been challenging. I'm okay, but just a lot of stuff going through my mind that I've been processing and looking at through a new angle. I want to talk about mental health, specifically ADHD, and intuition, and things like remote viewing and Reiki, and how they all have tied in my life in helping me to navigate through this journey that we're on. I made a decision a long time ago that I'm in this. I'm in this journey in search of wisdom, of understanding, of knowledge, of how to live my best life. And there's a cost to that in looking at the world and dissecting it and trying to understand it. Sometimes the ground drops out from underneath you, but sometimes you peel back the layers of yourself and you have these profound insights. And that's kind of what's happened to me over the last month again. And I attribute processes in my practice of remote viewing and of Reiki and of meditation. I attribute that ability, and I'll talk more about this. I attribute those skill sets to helping me to pay attention to my own mind. And this all started, I was struggling with some things, and I came across a TED Talk by a woman named, I think her name is Jessica. She has a YouTube channel, and it's called How to ADHD. Now, I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was in 6th grade. I was having trouble staying in my seat. I kept running my mouth. I always had something smart to say. I had trouble getting homework done. I was always fidgeting, like all the classic signs of ADHD. I went to see a therapist for a little bit, and they said, okay, you just need to take some breaks. When you're feeling fidgety, get up, take a break. And that was really just the validation that I needed. I had those, my teachers had that understanding. I didn't have an IEP or a 504. But then I just learned to deal with it and work with it and realize that, hey, I can control this if I set myself up for success. When I'm having a hard time, I take a break. And, that has really worked for me a lot. And then I made it through boot camp and the military and police work and all these things that I've done that traditionally they say people with ADHD would have a really hard time doing. And I've done it well. So I always figured ADHD, I've got that licked. That's easy. I can handle. I have it, but it's my superpower. I've never looked at ADHD as an actual deficit or a problem. And I still believe that. I believe the bigger problem is the world around us, the structure of our own society. Our brains don't conform to the rigid structure of wake up at this time, be at work at this time, work on this, work. Our brains are constantly searching for stimulation, and there's challenges with the reward system of dopamine in our minds. A whole bunch of neat science out there now about ADHD. Anyway, I'm digressing. I didn't think ADHD was a problem. And then I listened to this TED Talk, and she went through all the ways as an adult that ADHD manifests itself. The big one being having trouble getting started, having trouble focusing on things that people are saying if you're not interested, when you're at work, or if there's multiple distractions in the room. I work for a school, so I'll be talking to one person and three other people are talking, and it's a real struggle for me, a real stress point. I was coming home from work every day just angry and feeling horribly guilty because I don't want to listen to my children talk, because I'm so at that point overstimulated. I just want to go out and sit by myself for the next 3 hours and not listen to anything and not even think, just to shut everything off. And it was really hard. And I listened to this TED Talk. I said, well, let's see if I can learn any new tips, and maybe ADHD ties in. And I was so moved by what this woman was saying. I started watching her channel. She's been out since 2015, but she has all these like 5 to 12 minute videos. And it was one of the most empowering and validating things. Every video I watch, I go, yes, I deal with that. And because of that, I have this many problems. I struggle with anxiety because of this, and I struggle with anger because of this, or I feel lost, or I feel incompetent, or, oh my gosh, I'm masking, which is like hiding what I'm going through and looking like I'm just confident and in control. Because on the surface, like I said, I would consider myself very high functioning, but I've had these struggles. So anyway, I opened myself up and really listening. I listened to Andrew Huberman has a podcast. He's a neurobiologist or neuroscientist, and he was talking about a lot of the science behind ADHD. He was talking about what stimulant medication does for your mind when you're on ADHD, because we have an issue with dopamine regulation. And he talked about how the stimulant medication, and I'm not a doctor, so please don't take any advice from me. I want to give that disclaimer here. But anyway, he talked about this. I'll have links to it. And something shifted in my mind because, I grew up in the Nancy Reagan era of just say no to drugs. And I remember just feeling so negative towards anything drug related. Now let's add to that mix this feeling of I can control my own mind. It's a cop out. I'm weak if I take something. Or then the big thing in my mind too is I have zero trust in the pharmaceutical industry because of all the challenges that are out there. So I had all these things in my mind of, hey, I don't need medication. And I'm not on medication. I want to be clear right now, but I didn't even have a mind open enough. At the end of every podcast, I say, keep an open mind and let your intuition be your guide. We don't realize sometimes where our mind is closed until we're forced to confront it and open it a little bit. And that's kind of what I went through. And what Huberman was saying was that's why a lot of people with ADHD are prone to addiction. They're coffee drinkers, they're cigarette smokers. And because it's a stimulant that actually helps them to ground to baseline. And I was feeling so just beat up mentally. I'm not a coffee drinker. I never drank coffee before. And I was always like, I don't need that. And because my fear was that, I'm going to drink coffee and I'm going to become addicted to it. And then one day the apocalypse is going to happen and I'm not going to have coffee and I'm going to be shit out of luck. That was my logic, right? And a lot of stuff happening here. But in hearing that, I said, I need to figure something out. So I tried coffee, and I tried coffee, and then I went to see my therapist. And at that point, the coffee had kicked in, and I went to a park in my area. And as soon as I got out to the park, it was like the first warm day of the year. The sun was shining. And the caffeine must have hit me right then. And I wasn't jittery. I wasn't wild and crazy. Like, I never felt so normal in my entire life. And when I was journaling about it, I just wrote down it was one of the best moments of my life. And that's not to supersede, like, the birth of my kids or all these other things. It was really the first time, and as long as I can remember, that I felt normal. Like my brain worked. Everything that I'm afraid of, and all the anxiety, every problem that seems like it needs to be solved right now. And then I get so overwhelmed that I just don't do anything, or I pick at this and I pick at that and I just jump around. All that noise went away and everything was clear. And all those big problems seemed more like small, manageable problems. I always manage, but it's always chaos in my mind. And I was so overjoyed. And I regret, I wanted to film a video, but I was in a park and there's people everywhere. And I knew that I would start crying. And I didn't want to start crying doing a selfie video and be one of those people. But I was so overjoyed with, oh my gosh, I did it. I'm normal. And I never realized, not that I want to be normal, just that my brain was working in a way that was efficient. And it felt really good. It felt really good. And that within that day, like I restructured so many things, how I organized, like I got all this stuff done and I put all these things in place for myself over the next few days in trying to restructure and kind of get on this path. And I started doing research and collecting data and really trying to understand my ADHD and caffeine and the impacts that it has. And I was like, this is it. All I got to do is drink a cup of coffee and everything works. But then our bodies develop a tolerance. And so I started drinking a little bit more. And again, this was in a controlled, structured way. I was actually charting data when I was drinking it, how much I was having. I was like, okay, I'm not feeling the effects anymore. I'm going to have a little bit more. And ultimately what ended up happening was then it had the opposite effect. And then my anxiety spiked and I went through almost like a paranoia. The anxiety just got so bad. Like my worst fears, I started really freaking out about just everything in my mind. But what was interesting was when I was at my worst, I recognized that I was still in there. I recognized that my mind and my body was having an experience that I couldn't control, but I could observe. And it was almost like being in a remote viewing session or a deep meditation where you can, I don't want to say I stepped out of myself. I stepped into myself and watched from the outside. And when I was at my absolute worst in a full-blown panic attack, there was a part of me that compartmentalized. And I looked at my mind and I said, this is going to pass. The caffeine and everything needs to run out of your system. So I still felt the panic. My thoughts were still horribly racing, like negative, scary thoughts, just nonstop. But I knew that it would pass. And the next day, I didn't drink any more coffee. I stopped. And my mind just felt fatigued. Everything was moving in slow motion. It was a relief. It was an out breath for me. But I attribute my meditation practice, my daily meditation practice, my Reiki practice, my yoga, my remote viewing practice, things that are consistently regular in my life, to allowing me to not completely fall apart, to observe my own mind. It was a beneficial experience for me. And it has allowed me to continue with this experiment to try to find a way. When they talk about people who are addicted to drugs, what are they doing? They say they're chasing that first high, right? I'm not trying to get high. I understand why people self-medicate, because you have that moment of everything is right with the world. I miss it. And I've had some moments that have been on that trajectory since then. I've had some successful days when I can get everything right, but I want to be able to regulate that more consistently. And it makes me sad. It's like, I quoted Flowers for Algernon, if you remember that book. I read it when I was a kid, and this guy was mentally deficient, and he took a smart pill, but the smart pill was short-lived, and he knew that he was going to lose it. And it was in that moment that he's at the height of his intelligence and realizing this is going to be short-lived. I texted somebody that day. I was feeling really good, and I said, "This feels like a flowers for Algernon moment," because I knew it wasn't going to last. And I think that made it harder in knowing what it feels like when your mind is clear and is working the way you want it to, and knowing you're going to go back to that darkness or that cycle or that stress. But that keeps me going right now, because I know that state exists. And I do a lot. Like I said, I do yoga every day. I meditate every day. I practice Reiki every single day. I remote view regularly. I journal. I eat healthy. I exercise every day. Like, there's all these things that I do, all the checklists of the self-care things, not because it's a chore, but because it's important to me. And I feel good when I do it. Despite all of those things, I still struggle. And that it brought me to the realization to strip away. And I did a show not too long ago talking about, releasing our judgments. We don't even realize sometimes when we have these judgments and these dogmas. I was all this time saying, I'm not going to drink coffee because one day I might need it and it won't be there. But what about the last 40 years where I could have used it and didn't have it? I got to stop. We need to stop worrying about the what ifs of the future, because for me, the future that has not happened and may never happen is dictating how I'm living my life today. We need to stop living for that moment, for that possible moment. And those of you that watch me, I struggle with that. As a remote viewer, I've stopped looking at future targets because it just gets in my head too much. Oh, here's what's going to happen, so I can't do this, or I shouldn't do that, or I need to prepare for this. For what? So then the time that I have here, I'm just going to be stressed and anxious? No. So I still love remote viewing. I'm just not looking at the future anymore. I'm not trying to look at the future anymore. Unless something spontaneously hits me, then I'll say it's from a higher power telling me it's something I need to be aware of. And I'm not saying I won't ever look at the future. I'm saying for the state that I'm in right now, I don't think that experiment is serving me for what my goals are. With that being said, in terms of looking at the future, at the same day I had that great experience with my coffee, I booked my first astrology reading. I finally pulled the trigger. I found somebody, and I was blown away. And it gave me a blueprint for kind of the path that I'm on and the challenges I can expect. And not necessarily in saying, here's what's going to happen. It was like, here's what you're preparing to go through. Here's the course that you're on, the areas of your life that are going to need some work right now. And date by date, I'm watching these things happen as my astrologer has told me things are going to unfold. And that feels different from doing a remote viewing session and seeing, oh, there's an accident this day, or oh, there's a major storm or a event. This is more, the blueprint for how I'm developing in my own life's purpose and path, and stepping into that and getting that validation. So that piece has been tremendously helpful for me. And I'll probably talk more about that in another podcast. I want to focus on just the mental health aspect here. I'm just amazed. I've been in special education the last 14 years, I guess, 13 to 14 years. And I've lived with ADHD. And I always thought ADHD was just something that wasn't a big deal. And what I've learned is that it is, and that I lying to myself. I don't know if it's pride or ego or just denial, or maybe it's just ignorance. Because I felt that I mastered it. I graduated high school. I got into college. I graduated college, with honors. I have a master's degree. I went through boot camp. I did all of these things, and it's not my ego. It's just I accomplished a lot of things that are very hard for people with ADD and ADHD. So I always thought it wasn't an issue. But one of the places it affects me is in my interpersonal relationships. Simple or simple things, like, hey, I'll call you to schedule plans, or, oh, I need to respond to this email, or, hey, I need to take those muddy boots off my front porch and bring them inside and clean them. It's a non-preferred task, and therefore I can't find the motivation to do it. It seems almost impossible sometimes. And in hearing other people with ADHD talk about that, and talk about how there is something going on in our minds that makes it very difficult for us to do those things, was just validating for me. I think of many of the arguments I've had and the trouble that I've gotten into as an adult for putting things off and not wanting to call people or schedule things, or because the idea of doing that seems monumentally difficult and uncomfortable for me. But then when the mood strikes, I'm in the mood, it's like the greatest thing in the world. And when you look at it from the aspect of it's that problem with dopamine in your brain, the reward chemical, I don't know enough about it, but through that lens, it makes sense. Or when I can get lost in scrolling through my phone, which is really designed to manipulate, I'd say, brains like mine, so much has made sense. But when I listen to people talk about ADHD and why they call people with like ADHD and autism, neurodivergent, and it from what I understand, it just means your brain is different from the norm, right? But I love the movie Divergent. So when I hear neurodivergent, I take a lot of pride in that. It makes me feel really cool. And I always tell students, I've been saying this for well over a decade to my students, ADHD is your superpower once you learn to harness it. And it is. I do a lot. I have done a lot of things, and it's because of my ADHD and my ability to think abstractly and outside the box. And with ADHD, our minds move so fast sometimes, we make connections way faster than a neurotypical brain. And this served me as an intelligence analyst. I was looking at piles and piles of data, and I was just able to make all these connections. As a podcast host, you've heard me go off on analysis with different spiritual and philosophical thoughts that I have, and my work with crypto viewing, and even in remote viewing. I feel that neurodivergence in my mind has served me well. And again, I don't mean this as a cocky ego statement. This is just how I perceive my mind. But this experience was the first time that I viewed it as for the challenges that it presents, and acknowledged that, yes, it's hard. And I've been ignoring and hiding the fact that it's hard because I don't want to. I guess it's embarrassing to say I need help. It's embarrassing for me to say, I can't do that. It's like, why? It's something that's so simple, right? But I can't. So at least knowing that other people out there can't maybe not can't, but have a hard time like me was very empowering. And that kind of started the spiral for me, ultimately in a good way. And it opened me up. Now, again, I'm not a doctor. I'm nothing close to a doctor. So I give no medical advice whatsoever. What I do know is that after this experience, if there is something that exists out there that will allow my mind to better regulate so I can still be me, then I'm going to explore it. I have my opinions on the pharmaceutical industry, but sometimes we need help. Sometimes these things can help us. So I don't know where that journey is going to lead me, but it's no longer a hard no for me. It's now let me gather more information and see what is the best thing for my mind, because we've got one life to live. And in that moment of clarity, I realized what I have been missing out on, and it hurts. So more to come on that one, my friends. I think it's important to recognize with mental health and with all of these spiritual practices that we have, remote viewing, Reiki, meditation, whatever you're into, I don't think there's one method that checks all the boxes. If I just did Reiki, there'd be so much that I missed. If I just drank coffee, there'd be so much that I missed. If it was just remote viewing, again, there'd be so much that I missed. It's a holistic approach to things. You're not going to find, I mean, if you do that, it's great, but I don't think you might find one method that opens up a world of opportunity for you. And in that moment, you feel like everything is right with the world. But there's an entire system of things that I think we need to invest our time, our thoughts, and our energy into in order to find that path to being our best selves and making the most out of this existence that we have. Each training quadrant gives us another perspective that we can then incorporate into our holistic worldview and our identity and how we want to approach this existence. If you find things are hard, don't be afraid to ask for help. As I started this off, this whole realization came as I left my therapist's office. That has been a big piece in helping me to stay grounded. Despite all the other things I have going on, I still recognize sometimes I need to talk to somebody else to make sure I'm not getting too close to the edge, or to guide me or to validate whatever it may be. So there's a holistic approach here, and this is a journey. If you're just getting into this and you're like, hey, I'm going to learn this in a week, and then I'm going to know everything. That's not how it goes. This journey at times is very hard, and it's lifelong. I know that as soon as I reach another level and I say, hey, I figured this out, then you have, if you keep going, 1,000 more questions, and you realize, man, I don't know anything. But it was neat to figure that one piece out. But that one piece is actually not this whole big thing. It's another tiny piece in a bigger picture. And that's good, because it keeps us growing and it keeps us improving. I feel like I'm all over the place here with this conversation. But one of the things that I kept thinking about as I'm listening to people talk about ADHD and hearing the term neurodivergent and understanding, I've worked with a lot of students with ADHD over the years, and growing up with it, and seeing how, especially in education, typically our students with ADHD are the ones that have a really hard time with the structure set up in the classroom. The accommodations we put in place for kids with ADHD are frequent breaks, or we scaffold information, or we give them chunks of information in smaller, more consumable parts, because it's very difficult for our minds to get engaged in something that we don't find interesting, right? So the ADHD kid, it's not that they can't focus, it's that they're focused on everything in the room. So we have the ability to focus on everything that's going on until we find something that's interesting, and then we hone in on it and we're hyper focused on what we're seeing. And these are the kids who can really wreak havoc in your classroom if you're not a strong teacher, if you don't have good classroom management and good engagement and good differentiation for your students. I'm using a lot of educational terms here. But if you don't know how to gear your lessons to accommodate all minds, these students will show you where your weaknesses are. And most teachers, without this experience, they reach their frustration point and they send them out. They give them detention. They call their parents. They put them in another classroom. That oh, these kids, they're just a problem. They're just a disruption. No, these kids are identifying weaknesses in your approach to education, and they're so bored because usually they're pretty intelligent, but they're not stimulated enough in your class. I'm reminded Barbara Marciniak's book, Bringers of the Dawn. And that book is, in my opinion, it's a very new age book. So I take it with a grain of salt. It's a channeled book. It's a great read, though. But one of the things she talks about is that these what are they? The indigo kids, I think this talks about them, are the system busters. I always thought that was a neat thing. And in thinking about that book and thinking about ADHD, in a lot of ways, I think that's what we are. We disrupt things because we look at things from so many different angles. And that's where I think that it's a gift. If we learn to harness that superpower, it can also be a detriment to us. We can break apart a system and come up with new ways to do things if we can find the courage and the structure in which to do that appropriately. I really do think that it's a superpower. Percy Jackson, the lightning thief, when he talked to one of the gods, the kid said, "I'm not that good. I have ADHD." And he says, "Actually, why do you think you have ADHD? Because on a battlefield, you have to be focused on everything that's going on. You are a warrior." And that is very true. ADHD allows us to focus on multiple things that are going on. There's days I come home and I say, I don't know how I managed all of those tasks simultaneously, because you're so focused on everything that is happening. And for hunter-gatherers, that could have been the difference between we eat tonight and we don't. When you're out in the woods and you're taking in the sounds, the colors, the smells, the change of the wind, the trails, what animal life is around, all of those indicators, the tiniest little changes, we see that. We perceive that. So when you're in a classroom and you're not hyper focused on something, every fidget a kid makes, every sound a teacher makes, every distraction in the hallway, the airplane flying outside, the cars beeping, kids laughing, the noise from next door, the way my shoes feel, the way my desk squeaks, all these things, the pencils in my hand. Oh, I now have graphite on my fingers. All of these things are distracting to someone in an educational setting. But when you're on something like a battlefield or as a hunter-gatherer, these things serve you. So I truly believe ADHD, when used in the right context, in the right environment, is a superpower. But when we try to function in everyday life, it can create a major challenge for us. So I highly recommend, and I haven't reached out to this person. This is not an endorsement, but I highly recommend. I'll have the links to it. If you or somebody you know deals with ADHD, check out that YouTube page, because for me, it's been life-changing and validating, and it's helping me move, I think, what'll be to the next level. Speaking of next level, I know I said things have been hard over the past month, but that doesn't mean I've stopped moving. Some good things are happening. We completed with help one of Coral's targets. I'm not going to reveal what the target is yet, but the project is finished, and we will be releasing what it was shortly. It was an amazing project. So we'll have a video coming out hopefully soon talking about where we went and what we learned. have another one in the works. Darby's tasking us now. We're working on another project, remote viewing project with Hellfire. Very exciting stuff. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work on that target for Darby. I have another session to do, and that's all I'm going to say about that. In addition, if you watched our Whitley Strieber's implant of that remote viewing session where I was the project manager, Don and I were actually just guests on Whitley Strieber's Dreamland. And for me, this was a dream come true. Talk about setting goals and achieving them. Whitley Strieber has always been someone I've admired. I remember when I was writing my first book, I was living in my old home, and I remember when I started writing, and I said, "Who do I want to be?" And I said, one day I would love to do what Whitley Strieber does. I would love to write books about the paranormal, and I would love to do a podcast where I interview people and I talk about things like this and just do all sorts of cool spiritual stuff. That was in 2008, 2009, when I started that visualization, wanting to do something like that. So to be a guest on this man's show and to be able to talk, in my opinion, intelligently about things that we now have in common, that was a life goal. It was a life goal to meet on that level someone I look up to as a role model. So that show will be out on May 12th. Today's April 30th as I'm recording this. It'll be out on May 12th is what Whitley told me. So I will have that linked as well, so you can see that interview and listen to Don and I talk about our experience with Hellfire and what it was like remote viewing the implant in his head. But a really cool experience. In addition, I am working hard on I'm putting together some Reiki stuff for people interested in learning Reiki. Reiki has been such a grounding force for me. Another tool that I've used to help better really understand my own intuitive and psychic abilities, as well as work on relaxation, healing, and comfort for people. But it's really given me a sense of control when I first got into it and understanding it. So I became a teacher last year, and I've been slowly building the course. And now, so I'm getting ready to launch a course on Udemy. It'll be a self-paced course if anybody wants to go through that and learn Reiki 1. And then the attunements, I think the direction I'm going is you'll then schedule an attunement with me, and we'll log in for a session, and I'll be able to get you attuned to your Reiki 1. Other things I'm considering, and if you're interested in this, please drop me a note in the comments or wherever. I'm considering opening up my time for virtual Reiki sessions, where I can connect with those of you that are interested, for a very moderate fee, but for a Reiki session, just to kind of expand in that direction. And the other piece that I'm also contemplating is holding live in-person Reiki trainings. I'm thinking my first class will be a small group, maybe 5 to 10 people, just because I think it keeps it more intimate that way. And probably over the course of 3 to 4 weeks, maybe meeting once a week, going through the lessons, talking about things, answering questions that will include a Reiki 1 attunement. So these are things, be through Zoom, just to connect and engage and really learn and grow together. So these are things I have on the horizon. If you think that it's something you'd be interested in, please give me that feedback. That helps me to stay motivated. This is my ADHD. I get all these ideas, and then it takes me forever to really get them all going. But these are things that are now, in my opinion, close to completion, because I've been working on them for a while as the mood strikes me. And so I think it'll be beneficial for those of you that are interested in continuing this journey here. So let me know if that's something if any of those things are something you'd be interested in. Lastly, I'm also slowly chipping away at some more books. The Hive book 2 is well underway. I don't have any deadlines yet on that one. Hopefully I'll have more time over the summer, but that's still a work in progress as well. So just a little teaser for that. That book is in the works. The whole book's written up here. It's just I haven't put it down into words. And in the very near future, I have a project that is done. It's called My Reiki Journal. I don't have it sitting in front of me, but it's a 75 plus writing prompts designed for people who are learning Reiki, or it's a great refresher for people who know Reiki, using writing as a form of meditation to better connect with yourself and with Reiki energy. It's a great series of writing prompts to help you better reflect and grow as a Reiki practitioner. So My Reiki Journal will be coming out very soon. I'm just working on putting that launch plan together for that. So look for that in the very near future. And that's all I got, my friends. So I appreciate you listening. My anxiety's kicking in now, so I hope this just wasn't an hour of me just complaining about how hard my life is, because that wasn't my intent. My intent truly was to share with you my experience and realization of how ADHD has impacted my life, and how my spiritual practices have helped me to better, I think, navigate and observe my mind as I'm going through this, trying to find a solution or strategies where I can really just be happier, because that's my goal, because it hasn't been easy. So I hope that if you're still with me, that you understand that, and that you found some value in this. Let me know. Help my fragile ego. All right, friends, thank you so much for listening to the Seeker podcast, where small changes among the masses can have a massive impact around the world. I encourage you to be that change. Never stop questioning. Keep an open mind. Let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
It becomes the bottom. You put in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend. Be water, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend. Be water, my friend.